Welcome to University of Hoops, the show that gives you an inside look at the people making everything happen on your favorite basketball team. Today, we are very excited to welcome University of Colorado assistant coach Zach Ruebesam. Zach, welcome to the show.
Appreciate it, Blake. Thank you guys for having me. Big fan of the show, what you guys are doing. I've listened to every episode so far, but really, fortunate and looking forward to talking to you guys.
Hey, that's amazing, man. That's literally why we're doing this. So that's awesome to hear, and we're super stoked to be talking to somebody who works in one of the best conferences in the country, in the Pac-12, of course, with a really good team this season, with a bunch of young, good players, and of course we know a lot about your backstory and some of the other guys you've worked with. So we're excited to get in to all of that. But I kind of want to start with this. I mean, and we'll get into your journey more as we go forward, but you've done about every job that there is now on a basketball team at the college level. I want to begin though with what you're doing right now as an assistant coach for the Buffaloes. So what are your main responsibilities on the staff in your job?
Yeah, first, I think I'm very fortunate to have kind of climbed the ladder in that way to where I have my hand in a lot of different things. I've been in almost every position, like you said. So it's very fortunate for my growth and to get into this point. But, currently, getting the promotion to assistant coach, the big thing that changes, obviously, at the NCAA level is being able to coach full time on the floor. As a young assistant coach, right, and really young coaches, that's what we're all hungry for. So, dream come true to be able to do that at my alma mater. So that's kind of the biggest change from years past. Different than that, we have a little bit of a smaller staff at the Power Five level. We don't have the assistant director of ops, the video coordinator, assistant video coordinator. We have five full-time assistants, and then our head coach, along with our graduate assistant, student managers. So it hasn't changed a ton, other than the recruiting and the on-court coaching piece. Biggest responsibilities outside of coaching and recruiting, I do all of the personnel for every scouting report, so almost an advanced scout in a sense. So I'm really, looking 1 to 2 to 3 games ahead, working on the personnel for every all 31 games. I do scheduling. I do incoming freshman stuff. I do the housing for our guys. I do recruit our walk-ons. Really, kind of every different part of the organization away from the coaching, I kind of handle as well. Besides, we have our director of operations who does the video, does the operations stuff. I'm kind of handling everything out besides that.
So you just got into what some of your responsibilities are. I want to go
Yeah,
deeper into that for a second. In terms
yeah,
of like what a game day is like versus what a non-game day is like, can you walk me through kind of what both of those kinds of days look like for you?
yeah. This semester we practice in the afternoon, so the non-game days, it is get to the office about 8:30, depending on what it is. First semester is really hard for the Buffaloes because we practice in the morning. So coach likes to do that with a little bit of toughness. We practice at 7:30 in the morning. So that first semester is hard. So, we get into the office this next semester about 8 o'clock, and it really turns into, for me, because I do all of the personnel for 31 games, we have games, 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 it goes right into film, right off the bat. I'll start with our next game, make sure all the stats are updated from that one. I got the clips I wanted to go, everything is ready for that one, and I kind of move on to the next opponent and kind of build my way through that. And then I'll sprinkle in some scheduling. I post on Basketball Travelers every day or two to try to make sure everyone who's looking for games know what opportunities we have for games, where everyone's at with that. Following up with some scheduling contacts. Then it'll get to 11 a.m. We'll have our staff meeting for practice, and by that time it's pushing noon. We'll get our assistants will get everything ready to go. What are we doing? This drill, this drill. We like to break our guys up, a little bit more smaller groups to get some one-on-one development with them, small group development, especially with the 5 assistant coaches. So pretty much every day we're splitting them up, figuring out what we're doing there. We have practice at 1:30, and then the last part of the afternoon, about 3:30, 4 o'clock, is cleaning up everything else from the day. So it's always different day to day. That's kind of a little bit of an archetype. And then game days, believe it or not, are a little bit more chill. They're a little bit slower, right? So 7 o'clock game, we're not all in here at 8 a.m. because it's gonna be a long night. We get here about 9:30, 10 a.m. I do a lot of the walk-on red shirt workouts. We have a couple of red shirts, so we work them out every game day, making sure they're staying in shape, they're getting some skill work in. We'll have shoot around, pregame meal, and then right into the game. So not as much on game days. It's really just focus on that specific opponent and then looking forward to the next one as well.
I know that this has been a big year for you personally because I know before the assistant coach role, you were in a director of ops kind of role. So I think a lot of people would be really interested to know, being in a big D1 school. Number one, how did that opportunity come about? And number two, like what has the transition been like for you?
Yeah. Um, the best thing that the NCAA has done has, allowed schools to hire 5 assistant coaches. I think that has been great for really all levels. There's no downside to it, but it's been especially good for young coaches like myself that are trying to break into that role to be on the floor, especially at this level. Our staff is unbelievable. All 3 of our assistant coaches, prior to Coach Harton and myself being promoted, have been head coaches, right? They're all a little bit older. They're in their 50s. They've been head coaches. They love living in Boulder. They're loyal to Coach Boyle. So they're kind of set, our staff. But hiring the 2 new assistant coaches in the NCAA allowed, myself and Coach Carton to step on the floor, which is big for our development, big for our relationships with the guys to build it in a different way, right? I'm the youngest guy on staff. I have great relationships with our guys, but it's different when you can legally work with them one-on-one every day and work basketball stuff with them. So the transition for me was easy. I came from Belmont Abbey College Division II school where Coach Fickey, our head coach there, gave me a lot of responsibility, gave me a lot of freedom to do that stuff. So it was really kind of stepping back to the saddle at this level. And coaching is coaching at the end of the day. So it doesn't matter if you're a high school coach, it doesn't matter if you're a high major Division I coach, if you're a Division II coach, like coaching basketball is coaching basketball. So it's been great to kind of get back into that.
You talked a little bit about relationships and the relationships that you've been able to make with your players and coaching at the D1 level. And I know, as you said earlier, coaching at your alma mater, so you were at school in Colorado during a time where there were some really good guys, passing through the program then, and of course in the years since with the different stops you've been at. There are 2 guys I want to bring up to start with, and then of course let you bring up anybody else you want to bring up. But Spencer Dinwiddie, of course, who's now at the Lakers, Jabari Walker, who's having a really good sort of, I think, surprise season. With the Blazers, I'm sure all the talk was about Scoot Henderson and what he was going to do. And Scoot's having a good second half of the season, but Jabari Walker's been like a really good, I think, nice surprise for people within the Blazers organization. So the main thing I want to ask you is the quality that both of those guys have, I think, is that like they weren't necessarily at the time projected to be like long-term NBA guys, or even in Jabari's case, to come in and maybe contribute like right away, you know what I mean, in the way that he has. So from your vantage point, working with these guys when they were in school, what were some of the qualities that you saw in them? And were there any that made you think like, all right, like these are guys that are going to be able to succeed at the next level?
Yeah. Before I talk specifically about Bari and Spence, like I think that speaks directly to Coach Boyle and the impact he's had at Colorado. He has 7 NBA guys in his 14 years here. And like you're saying, there have been more underrated guys. Like, of course, we have Cody Williams this year, who's a McDonald's All-American 5-star. The projections are off the chart with his brother, all of that. But for the most part of the 14 years, it's been recruit guys that are very talented and develop them while their time here is at Colorado. And then they, go on to have these NBA careers. A guy like Alec Burks, who's still in the league, Andre Roberson, then you talk about Spencer and Jabari. So prior to talking about those specifically, I think it's really, really, exciting. And it speaks a lot to Coach Boyle about the program he's built here to recruit those guys and develop them to have an NBA career like that. So Spencer first. So Spencer was here when I was the head manager. We went to school here together. So we have a friendship, like are kind of on that same level as both students. But the one thing that always stuck out about Spencer is he has an extreme confidence that he was going to the NBA. Obviously, great talent, great size, but he had this extreme confidence. I don't want to call it arrogance, just a confidence in himself that he was going to do whatever it took to get there. Spencer, in turn, backed up that confidence with his work ethic. Like Spencer was in the gym, Spencer was in the weight room, Spencer took care of his body. He was a pro in college, right? And very mature, like very, very smart, but he kind of had that early. Jabari, I had when I was my first year here, back here, was 2021, director of player development, Jabari's sophomore year. And what I saw from Jabari, I wasn't here with his freshman year, but from the start of his sophomore year to the end of his sophomore year after he left, he developed that same sort of maturity and growth from year to year, right? He developed all right, I'm getting out early. I have a shooting routine before practice. I'm in the weight room. I'm doing prehab stuff after practice. I'm doing all of those different things that is necessary at the next level. I'm figuring out how to do it now. Obviously, both of those guys were, had the NBA size, had the NBA ability, all of that, but just really the off the court and the development and maturity wise, I think are two standards that stick out to him. And then, we've had guys like Derrick White. Like Derrick White was an under-recruited, transferred from UCCS, Division II All-American to CU. Derrick, his redshirt year, when he had to sit out because the old transfer rules, was the best player on our team. Like we had Josh Scott, who's a first-team All-Pac-12, who's still playing in Japan, but Derrick was special, and he had that same quality of, I am confident in my game, and I work to provide me that confidence, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, since you brought him up there too at the end, what is it like for you guys, not just yourself, but for coach and for the rest of the staff and even some of the current guys watching what Derrick is doing? I mean, they beat the Golden State Warriors yesterday by 50 points. Like they're just far and away so far the best team in the league this season. And Derrick, of course, not only with the Celtics, but then with the Spurs, with Coach Popovich, like he's had a lot of success in his young career. So what is it like for you guys watching an alum of the program do what he's doing now in the league?
Yeah, again, so Derrick was here when I was in college with him, so we have a good friendship. Like he came to my wedding, all of that. We're good friends. But I think as a program, it's very, very exciting and not surprising in a sense because Derrick is the same kid he was, 8 years ago when we were at school together. Like he's humble, he works his tail off, and he's just the ultimate winning basketball player. He makes every right play. He'll guard. He'll take 6 shots. I think on that blowout they had the other night, I think he took 6 shots. Had like 14 points on 6 or 8 shots, but guards, does everything. So just to see the kid that just continues to work and continues to get better and hasn't changed from getting drafted to going to the G League to now signs a big contract with the Celtics. He'll sign probably another big contract with the Celtics. Like he's the same dude over and over and over. And I think that speaks to Derrick, but also speaks to the kids that Coach Boyle brings in. Like character is the number one thing. Family is what we talk about here. And it's going to be a non-negotiable as long as Coach Boyle's here.
Got to ask you one more thing about Derrick. You
Yeah.
said you guys are buddies. Do you have a good Derrick White story from your time at Colorado?
I mean, I have a bunch of good Derrick White stories. I think the biggest thing with Derrick is just the goofiness. Like you see some clips of Derrick off the court and, he probably comes off a little shy at some points. Like when you get to know him, he's just a goofy same kid that wants to go out and have fun, but knows when it's time to work and the nicest kid of all time.
So we've talked in these last couple questions about like some of these NBA guys and maybe the qualities that you've seen in them. Another guy, and you mentioned him, of course, a couple minutes ago, is Cody Williams, of course, the younger brother of Jalen Williams, who's just completely jumped to another level this year as a star for the #1 seed in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder. With Cody, like the measurables are there. What he's doing just at his size and his length at the D1 level against Pac-12 competition, against non-conference competition, like you can see why, he is where he is right now at Colorado and sort of what his prospects are going forward for his future. I'm curious, when you work with a guy like that has a lot of that attention and has a lot of those, those sort of aspirations and those prospects where it's like he's on those mock draft boards and all of that. How is the approach? Like, what is the approach for you guys as a coaching staff to make sure that you're developing him the right way and making sure that he stays like on that right track?
Sure. I think the first thing that needs to be said about Cody is he comes from an unbelievable family. Like his parents, his brother are awesome, like very, very humble. Both his parents are military. They've worked their tails off to provide the life for their kids. And that shows in how Cody treats people, how he acts every day. Like he is a joy to be around, just one of the greatest kids. Again, goes back to what we look for in recruiting, this character piece that we want to be around good kids. And Cody as McDonald's, you would never know he's McDonald's All-American. He doesn't, act like it. Like he is just a normal, really good 18-year-old kid, right? The thing that sticks out about Cody, I talked about Spencer's extreme confidence and his work ethic. Cody has similar qualities, right? The confidence is not, it's hard to be as confident as Spencer Dinwiddie is. And Cody's confident. I don't say he's quite as confident as Spencer is because it's really hard to do that. But Cody works like he's already a pro. And I think being around Jalen helps that. Cody has his routine after practice. He was just in the weight room on an off day now, doing rehab for the ankle, all of that stuff early, like 8 a.m. here. So he has all of those things working towards the next steps. The big thing we have to remember with Cody, and I think we've seen it throughout this year, is different than some of the other guys we've talked about. He's still 18 years old, right? He is coming from high school to the college level. He is working on the exact same things that the rest of our freshmen are, right? Like a big thing when he got here this summer was we're going to work on your footwork, get you playing lower for shooting jumpers, all of that stuff. The same footwork that we work on all the freshmen, Cody's doing all the same things, right? The biggest thing with him and why I think he's going to be such a great prospect and eventually have a great NBA career is just the growth that we've seen since, July that he got here after Team USA to now. Like the growth, the understanding, the work, I think is what separates maturity. I think is what separates him from some other, 18-year-olds that are like, this is my first year in college. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and still kind of hit you like a tidal wave, like any freshman. But Cody's handled that stuff and just very, very mature for an 18-year-old.
Coach, we talked a lot about the players that you've worked with and the staff that you work with. Now I kind of want to focus more on you so that you can help our listeners and our viewers kind of get a sense about how you got to where you are and any advice that you may have for those out there watching the show that are looking to get into basketball or are, want to get to the D1 level and so on. So the first thing that I'll ask you to do, if you don't mind, is just to take us back to the beginning. How did you get into basketball and take us through your career journey to get to be an assistant coach with the Buffs?
Yeah. So first thing, very fortunate to be where I am. You have to have some, I don't want to call it lucky because I don't believe in luck. I think stuff happens the way they're supposed to based on your work and everything you put into it. But I've been very fortunate how things have kind of worked out in the timing of stuff. But I'm from a small town, Berthoud, Colorado. It's about 45 minutes north of Boulder. I grew up a big Buffs fan. Smaller high school, so played everything growing up. You played baseball, you played football, you played basketball. Be competitive at a smaller school. All the quote unquote best athletes have to do everything, right? But I fell in love with basketball from a young age. It just happened. I was a good high school player, but I ended up being 5'10", 5'11". So I knew that it probably wasn't going to work out where I was going to go to the NBA or go play high major Division I basketball. I had some Division II, some Division III offers out of high school, but my whole thought process was, I'm probably not going to make a career out of playing. I love to play, but I really am drawn to this coaching aspect of it. So entertaining some of those smaller school offers, CU was the only big school that I applied to. And I was fortunate enough that in my hometown, we have a former college coach that grew up in Greeley, Colorado, knew Coach Boyle. That's where Coach Boyle's from. Kind of, knew each other growing up. He had coached at Tennessee, been at Appalachian State. So Todd Sandstedt was key in making the connection with me and the coaching staff here to where, hey, I want to get into coaching. Is this manager route an option? So was fortunate that Todd connected me with Coach, and I came and met with Coach Boyle, April of my senior year. I was nervous, didn't really know what to ask, what to expect. And the cool part is the first person I met was Rodney Billups. Rodney Billups was in the director of operations role, hadn't quite got bumped up to assistant. That came like a month or two later, but he met me, he showed me around. I got to meet with Coach Boyle, and, Coach is like, if you come to Colorado, you can be a student manager, and, we'll see what happens from there. So the Rodney Billups story is key because it really comes to play a couple years later, but made the decision to come to CU, was a student manager for 4 years, was promoted to head manager my sophomore year. And I will say with, 100% confidence, I would not be in the position I'm in today, whether it be, getting to go to Denver, going to Belmont Abbey, and then eventually being hired back here at Colorado if I did not make the jump and was a student manager for Coach Boyle for those 4 years.
So you mentioned it that you went down to to the D2 level at one point, and I kind of want
Yeah.
to focus on that because I think
Yep.
like, you know, especially for people that want to get into coaching, the thing that I've learned more than anything from doing this show as a somebody who works in media and who grew up playing basketball and just loves learning more about what you guys do is it seems like the advice that you hear a lot across coaches at all levels is like, and you mentioned it actually off the top of the interview, like coaching is coaching, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and then it doesn't matter like whether you're coaching NBA guys or middle school players or whatever. So can you kind of talk about like sort of what went into your decision making there? Like why did you make that decision? And what
Yep.
your advice is on top of that in terms of just like, being open to whatever the opportunity, whatever the best opportunity may be, even if it's not at the place you think that you would might want to be at first.
Yeah, 100%. So again, I kind of said I've been very fortunate and the timelines have really stuck together. So the first person I met at CU was Rodney Billups. The timing was unbelievable. As I was graduating from CU, Coach Billups got the University of Denver job. And he was, open to bringing me with him as a graduate assistant, right? So I went from CU to Denver with Rodney Billups, a graduate assistant, was 2 years there. And then he hired me full time as director of ops, director of player development. One of the assistants there was Dan Fickey at the University of Denver. Rodney had kept him from the previous staff, and he was on our staff those 3 years that I was there at Denver. So those 3 years, Coach Fickey and I became really, really close, which in turn in the future really helps as he gets a head coaching job at Belmont Abbey College. And he's one of my best friends, was in my wedding. We built this relationship. And he's like, I want to give you a shot. I want you to come with me as my top assistant and do all of that stuff. So from that sense, it was an easy transition because I was going with someone I really trusted, right? It wasn't me jumping and I'm going to go move halfway across the country and work for someone that I've never really met or I've met a couple of times. It was going with as a 26, 25, 26 year old, moving across the country with Coach Fickey, his wife, his new twins, kind of becoming my family, right? The decision wasn't necessarily the level, right? We talk about coaching is coaching. It honestly doesn't matter to me what level you're at. Like if you're a high school coach, you're dealing with the same sort of issues basketball wise that, NAIA coaches, that Division III, Division II, Division I, high major coaches are all dealing with the same issues. You just have different talented level of players, right? So going to Belmont Abbey was really my shot that I felt to get on the floor and coach, again, legally doing what I wanted to do based on NCAA rules and getting an opportunity to recruit and then also do it with someone that was one really important to my development in Denver and someone that I really trusted and someone that was going to, because of that trust level, was going to give me the flexibility, the trust, and the opportunity to really take stuff by the horns, grow, maybe make a couple mistakes early, but really do it together, which I thought was very, very important in our time at Belmont Abbey.
You talked about the family aspect of
Yeah.
all of this. How important is that, especially at the college level and what you guys are trying to do?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of programs that preach family, right? And I can only speak from my time in, the 3 or 4 programs that I've been with, but especially for Colorado basketball, like family is everything. Like once above, always above. Like family is at the core of what we do. It was the same way at Denver with, Coach Billups bringing that from Colorado to DU. And then Coach Fickey, the same thing at Belmont Abbey, really preaching family, this tight knit, group of people trying to accomplish a goal together. And then for me personally, it's like I've been very fortunate, getting to live in Colorado where I'm from, getting my first job at Denver, first full-time job after college, moving an hour from my parents, and then making the jump to go to North Carolina. Like you got to think as a 25, 26-year-old, you're like, all right, I'm going to go do this. I'm just going to move halfway across the country after I've been here and was comfortable. Having Coach Fickey and Jordan and the twins and all of that, they became my family right off the bat in North Carolina and allowed me to grow. And then, I ended up meeting my wife in North Carolina. She moved back here with me. So making that jump to North Carolina, whether it was a Division I school, Division II school, but just getting out of my comfort zone and going somewhere different, like has completely morphed and, changed my life for the better.
What can you say in terms of advice that you would give to young coaches about just going for it and kind of
Yeah.
just like you said, just not being afraid to make that jump? Like how important is that in being able to move up in the business, do you think?
I think with I think with anything in life, that's the only way you're going to be able to grow. You have to get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfortable positions where stuff is familiar to you, and go and do something new. I think for young coaches trying to get into it, you have to know a couple of things off the bat. You're going to have to make some sacrifices, whether that be time, friends, monetarily. You're going to have to make sacrifices to get into it. But making that jump, if you really want to do it, sticking to it and knowing that it's going to be the long game. It's really going to be, to get jobs. You may not always be the quote unquote best candidate, but are you hanging around long enough to where, yeah, I have enough trust in this person. I'm going to go with them and they're going to get the opportunity to grow. And eventually you're going to outshine who the quote unquote best candidate was based on prior experience or whatever that was.
Got it. Makes sense. Sticking with kind of the theme of advice,
Yep.
what tools or softwares or anything in that sort of vein would you recommend to people learn sort of to learn and to sort of like hammer away at it and get better at if they want to you know work on the coaching
Yeah.
side?
Yeah. I would become this day and age, everything's evolving. Some teams are very analytically driven. Like we're very analytically driven as a society. So it's never a bad thing to know your college basketball analytics. Like if you're a college basketball fan or wanting to get into coaching, you should probably have a Ken Palm subscription, right? Like everyone is looking at that constantly. So knowing analytics and kind of how everything flows that way. But then you have your computer skills, right? You need to have an understanding of Excel. We're old school here with Coach Boyle. We still do a lot of our stuff with Excel and manipulate it that way. So having computer experience that way. Graphics are huge as young coaches. Can use Photoshop and create graphics, especially if you're at a smaller school like Belmont Abbey, right? We didn't have graduate assistants and managers, so I was creating our recruiting graphics. I'm not great in Photoshop, but am good enough that I can put out a decent graphic for recruits that we just offered them and they just signed. So having a general understanding of that, and then anything you can get, experience wise and film work is crucial as you're just coming in. Whether that's knowing synergy, like can you navigate synergy? Do you know what everything is going on in synergy? Editing. We have the Max editor for synergy. You don't need to pay for that, but can you have a general idea of how to cut up film? Can you use sports code? Whatever the system may be, are you at least familiar with it to when you get your hands on it, you can jump right in and it's not a completely new learning process for you and you can get cranking on stuff.
What's the best piece of advice that you feel like you've been given from a coach or a player or just a colleague in the space?
Yeah. I got two that come to mind right away. And the first one is for young coaches, and it's a little bit of an old school mentality, I would say, but 100% relevant today. So I was first year GA at the University of Denver. We had one of our assistants was Steve Snell. Coach Snell has been all over the place. He's currently an assistant back at NC State. Again, the young dude on the staff. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, kind of living my dream, like, oh, I'm a GA at Denver. And Snell sat me down, those first really couple weeks and like, look, you're the young guy on staff right now. We've all put in our time. Like it's your job to be here first and be cranking away, being productive, right? And then, it's your job to be here while the head coach is here to make sure everything, he doesn't need anything. When he heads home, like after you're done with all your stuff, you can head home, right? And it's a little bit of, especially since COVID, where we can do so much from home via Zoom, via all that. It's a little bit of an old school mentality, but what it created in me was an understanding of and kind of fueled a competitiveness with inside me, right? Like I'm going to beat this dude in the office. I'm going to make sure I'm doing everything I can, not to just like, oh, I'm showing I'm doing, outworking somebody or anything like that, but to be productive and contribute to the program and just know that this is the steps to go there. So I think that was a crucial piece of advice and kind of a standard Coach Snell set for me early. The other piece of advice, or that really makes me think, is what Coach Boyle says all the time: is when you're coaching, you have to try to think how your players are going to think, right? With all of the decisions you make, how are our players going to think about this, or what are they thinking as we change this from how we normally do it, right? Whether that's should we do it or should we not do it, or making sure we explain why we're doing it so the understanding is there. Because I think that's a major, growth that a lot of players these days have, is they want to know why. And I think that's our society in general, but players want to know why we're doing this, why we're doing this, why we're doing this. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you communicate it appropriately and everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, so, in terms of just like staying on the same page and you know, you talked a lot about what I'm trying to get at is like you've talked a lot about the relationship part of this, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like whether it's like basketball or it's any industry, a lot of times like when people ask for advice, it's just like, oh, like network, right?
Yeah.
And it's a very broad thing to say. And it's like, okay, where do I start? Do I like send like a cold LinkedIn message? Do I send an email like this and that? Like with what you do in basketball and just generally too, like what's your best advice for moving up and what do you think it takes to move up?
Yeah. What it takes to move up is you have to, you have to get your foot in the door somewhere, right? Like it's not always who you know, but you have to build genuine relationships, which is hard at the beginning, right? Coming out as a 22-year-old college kid, you don't know a lot of people. But I will say, just building relationships with people that were quote unquote on my level as GAs, managers, video coordinators. I've fostered these relationships now. Some of my best friends now are assistants around the country because we built this relationship when we're 22 years old. Now we're 30 years old and everyone's kind of moved up in the process. And then you meet people through them. So a good friend, Chris Huey, is an assistant at Loyola, Chicago. I met Chris when I was working the Kansas basketball camp when I was, 19, 20, 21 years old. He introduced me now to Evan Manning. Danny Manning's son, Evan, is an assistant at Arizona, and it fosters that relationship. So building networking kind of happens organically, as if you're genuine, if you're intentional, you follow up with people, and it kind of grows as you continue to mature and grow. But what it takes to move up is getting your foot in the door, and then what do you do while your foot's in the door? You get that first job. Are you doing everything above and beyond to build trust from that head coach to, if/when someone leaves or gets a different job or he gets a different job, are they confident and trust you to give you that growth and that next step? If all these coaches, like I said, same level, like we have a bunch of 30-year-olds that have kind of grown up together. It's the same with head coaches, right? Head coaches have this network where they know everybody from their time working together, their time around the country. If my head coach, has a good coaching friend over here, and his good coaching friend is looking to hire a, director of operations or an assistant coach, even if I'm in the director of ops spot, does my coach have enough trust in me and the work I've done to say, hey, he's looking for, my good friend's looking for an assistant. I'm going to suggest my guy because my guy does everything to a T, goes above and beyond. And I know he's going to do a great job for him. So it's kind of that way of making sure you build this trust in your head coach, and your head coach has this trust in you, to where if an opportunity arises, like it's a no-brainer for him to stick with you and promote you. If an opportunity comes up somewhere else, it's a no-brainer for him to promote you and sell you to the person that's hiring there.
Just because you were talking a little bit there about being a manager again back when
Yeah.
you were in school, I thought of something I meant to ask you earlier that I make
Yeah.
sure I want to ask you before we get out of here, which is what's your favorite memory from your time as a manager at CU?
Easy. We beat Kansas my sophomore year. Spencer he tore his ACL my sophomore year, hadn't gotten hurt yet. Skia Booker hit a runner from 30 feet with time expiring to beat Kansas. It had Wiggins on the team. Embiid was on the team. That will forever be my favorite memory as a manager, and something that will always stick out. So I think it was December 6th of 2013 was that game.
That's pretty sick. Yeah, I wouldn't forget that date either. That
Yeah.
happened to me. I'm sure running on the floor was that must have been something else to
Yeah,
be
I mean,
on the
it
floor.
was just unbelievable because obviously we're going back to the Big 12 next year. We were in the Pac 12 at that time. The history of Colorado basketball is not what it's been the last 14 years with Coach Boyle. And Kansas is Kansas. It's one of the best all time programs in NCAA history, right? So to have Kansas come into our building and have it be a sellout and majority Buff fans and then win in a manner like that is unbelievable game, unbelievable feeling for sure.
Coach, you've been super generous with your time. The last thing that I'll ask you is what we ask all of our guests as a last question, which is what
Yeah.
is your why behind what you do in basketball?
Yeah. My why, I don't want to say it's simple, but it really isn't. It goes back to the players. We talked a ton about relationships. It goes back to the players. I want to help our players grow not only as basketball players, but help them grow as individuals to prepare them for life after basketball, right? I don't want to say it's getting harder, but basketball is becoming a little bit transactional. You have the transfer portal, you have NIL. I want to build 40-year relationships with our guys rather than just a 4-year relationship. I'm looking hopefully to have an impact on these guys to where, I just got my first one this summer, getting wedding invitations where, I had a big enough impact on their life and, helped them so much that they are considering inviting me to come to the biggest day in their life when they're getting married to, their significant other. Right. So that's the first part of it. That's part of my why. It always goes back to the players. And I think it always has to be centered around the players because that's why we all do this. The second thing I think my why is it's the most powerful thing in life is being a part of something that's greater than yourself, right? We live in a society where it's very social media driven. It's very, I want satisfaction now. It's all about me. I post this picture, I do this. But being a part of something that is bigger than you, Colorado basketball is bigger than me. This team is bigger than me. Everything is bigger than myself. I think the most satisfaction and the most joy you get in life is being a part of something that like that and doing something special together with those individuals. And that's how you cultivate the family and the trust and the wedding invites and all of those different things build into each other.
Colorado men's basketball assistant coach, Zach Ruebesam. Zach, thank you so much again for joining the show. It was a pleasure talking to you, man.
I appreciate it, Blake. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for watching and listening to University of Hoops. We are the show that's taking you behind the scenes of your favorite basketball team every single week with interviews with awesome coaches like Zach from Colorado, interviewing guys at the D1 level, NBA G League level, NBA level, and everywhere in between. We will be dropping content every single week on our YouTube at Univ Hoops and on all social platforms under the same @ that's at UNIV Hoops. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.